Okay, here I am back on camera. This is real easy for me to do when I come across this is not really a super short story, but it's kind of short, but it's really interesting, and I came across it and I have time, so I thought I would put this out there. So we're gonna do another live read here. I call them live reads, but I figured out a way to edit them a little bit so you don't hear me stumbling. But this is a really good story, and I'm gonna jump right into it. The writer says, "Dear Cam, this is a true story. In the 1970s, I was a military policeman. I'm an honorably discharged veteran of the United States Army. And after I got out of the Army, I went to college for a few years and then studied to be a real estate appraiser. And I started my own business in 1980 as a fee appraiser. I mentioned the above to show you that I'm an honest person and a professional. I work for banks and loan companies mostly, but I also work for accountants and lawyers and the courts. One day in July of 1983, I was called to do an appraisal for a client of a lawyer that I worked with from time to time. The lawyer asked me to come to his office to get the key to the property. The house was vacant. The appraisal was an estate appraisal for heirs and for tax purposes. The lawyer told me that no one could go to the property with me because that was my normal policy to never go alone to any property, and he knew that. He said that they trusted me, so I made an exception for them and I went alone to the property. I wish I had never made such a foolish exception." It's getting good. When I got to the property, I took pictures of the outside, measured the house for square footage, and also so that I could draw a plot map. The house was about 100 years old. It was a late Victorian-style house, and it was old but quite ornate on the outside. After making my observations of the outside, I used the key to enter through the back door. There was no electricity on in the house, and the day was hot. It was 100 degrees outside. There was a nasty smell inside, like rotten food, and I guessed the refrigerator might be the source of the smell at that time. The house had an obsolete floor plan as there were no hallways. Doors from one room led into the next room. In the back, where I entered, was a kitchen, and I could see 2 different rooms from there. I went to the left into a bedroom. It was a bedroom from hell. When I went into the room, I felt a pressure and both doors slammed shut. There was an electric feel about me, and every hair on my body stood on end. And then a heavy chest of drawers began to move, and it rocked over to the door I had entered through and blocked it off. And I tried the other door, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. The room became so cold that I could see my breath. It was then that I heard a loud, deep male voice in the room, and it said, "Get out of my house, you bastard." I was never more scared in my life, and I answered and I said, "I can't leave. You've locked me in." And then I said, "I'm here to do an appraisal for your estate. Maybe you don't know it, but you're dead. If you don't let me do this appraisal, they'll just keep sending in more people until it gets done." Well, I had no choice but to stand my ground, and then the pressure in the room subsided and the door clicked open. I could feel this creepy spirit on my back and neck, as if it were looking over my shoulder and reading my clipboard. As I walked through the house, I kept up a monologue that described what I was thinking and doing. And when I got to the last room, before entering the kitchen again, I said, "I don't see any evidence of any type of heating." When I finally got back to the kitchen, there was a large open trap door in the floor that opened into a stairway down into a dark cellar. And I said, "Well, I guess I better go down there to see the furnace." I turned toward the stairs as if to go downstairs, and then I whirled around and ran out the back door. I slammed the door and I locked it, and then I ran for my Lincoln Continental and I jumped in. My car wouldn't start. I was so frightened that my adrenaline kicked in, and I got out of the car and pushed it 30 feet until I had it past the property line. I drove back to my office and completed the appraisal, and when I had it finished, I delivered it to the attorney who had ordered it, And I charged that son of a bitch double, and I never accepted a job from him again. I didn't say anything about the ghosts or spirits to him. I had a feeling that he knew that there was a supernatural presence in that house, and I was ticked off. I did more research into the property and the obituary of the guy who had lived there. He was a World War II veteran that had blown out his own brains in that creepy bedroom. The smell in that house wasn't rotten food. It was the smell of a rotten human body that lingered long after the corpse was removed. I watched that house in the MLS listings, and in the MLS sold property books. It sold for the appraisal amount the first time, and then it sold rapidly several times over the next 2 years. And each time it sold for less and less, and people kept buying it because it seemed to be a real bargain. I spoke to the realtors that sold it. This house was no bargain. Nobody could ever spend the night in there ever again. And 3 years later, the new owner had it knocked down and rezoned commercial. I went back to the house and took a brick from it that was on a pallet. Eventually, that property became a parking lot for a convenience store. The haunting was over. Cam, this is a true story of a freaky, creepy, haunted house. The details of this story were experienced by me. I never believed in hauntings before I went into that house, and now decades later, I'm still 100% certain that this haunting actually happened. This also convinced me that there is some kind of existence after death, maybe life after death for most, but this guy, this ghost, this spirit is in hell. So if there's a moral to this story, never ever kill yourself. And he signs the email, Jesse. He said go ahead and tell you his name, but his first name is Jesse. But I love this story. I know it scared the crap out of this guy, and I know that all the people who bought that house for years and years afterwards lost a ton of money every time that thing sold. They couldn't stay in it a night, and this is kind of like the Amityville story, the Amityville horror story. But I thought it was interesting, and I knew you guys would love it, so I thought I would do it in a live read. And I hope you did like it, and I will see you guys on the next podcast. Thanks.